Hello and welcome to another Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig, joined as always by Andrew. Today we're going to talk about the Innings Festival, the Black Keys. We're going to talk about LS Dunes again. But first I'm going to say, how's it going, Andrew? And he's got a surprise topic to start the show.
Yeah, well, it's going pretty good. To start things off with Weathercast, everybody's favorite segment, I actually felt the warmth of the sun this week, which was a nice feeling. It had been many, many months since I'd felt actual warmth from the sun. So, that's nice. That gets me ready for spring. But I was listening to the radio this morning, Craig, and they did a Today in History thing, and they mentioned that today, on this day in 1980, I think, they gave out the first ever Grammy for Best Disco Song. So first of all, I'm curious if you have if you can guess what might have been the winning disco song. It is a very famous song. You know the song.
A Heart of Glass.
That's a fair guess. But no, it's I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor.
Kind of the disco song.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one if you're going to have the first one. But where this gets interesting, I'm curious if you can guess how many, because obviously they don't still give out a Grammy today for Best Disco. That is no longer a category.
Although they should.
Can you guess how many Grammy Awards they gave out for Best Disco Performance?
Like how many years in a row from 1980?
Yeah.
I'm just going to say one.
You are correct. It was one. That is the one and only time. So obviously,
it's like the disco Olympics when they let a host country put in like ping pong or something special, and then it's immediately removed the next year.
Or breakdancing. But no, so obviously disco started in the 70s. Like it was popular more than 1 year. But they finally in 1980, like this is so Grammys, they were finally like, hey, let's actually make this a category. And by 1981, everybody hated disco so much that they were like, yeah, let's just not do that again.
And that experience probably kept them from adding rap and hip hop. They're like, oh, it might be another flash in the pan.
We got to make sure that this is legit. But it really got me thinking, though, like disco is such an interesting genre in that way. Like, I'm wondering if you can think of another genre that got super popular like that and like just disappeared. Like you hear elements of disco today, but nobody is making proper disco music today. And I'm wondering if you can think of another genre that's like that. Because I was kind of struggling to think of like what else have been things that maybe had a limited run in terms of an entire genre.
I can't think of anything that's a perfect analog to disco, but the first thing that came to mind is, how many different waves of ska have we had?
That's not a bad one. I mean, there are still proper ska bands today, but
I also don't think we're going to get another wave of disco per se.
Yeah. Like if we wanted to get really granular, maybe swing. Like remember when swing had
Squirrel
like
Nut Zippers, Zoot Suit Riot.
Yeah. Like there was like that brief moment where it got like strangely popular.
But I think disco is so hyper specific that we probably will never get another disco craze ever again.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, like to think about a genre that kind of pops up, gets super popular for this like brief moment in time, and then everybody just turns on it, and like just everybody hates disco.
Has that ever happened in another art form? Like I think there was the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So you get it in game shows. You got it in reality TV for a while when Survivor and then Big Brother. And I know to some degree all that stuff still exists.
Yeah, Survivor is still going. They're on like season 50 or some crazy like that.
But it pops in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
Up and down and up and down and up and down.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like even like.
What about video games?
Like a video game genre?
Like first-person shooter and third-person shooter are always kind of there. Real-time strategy is always kind of there.
In some ways, the arena shooter is almost going out of style right now just because of how popular, like, the Fortnite kind of, whether you want to call it an extraction shooter or survival shooter, like those, like...
Well, and that they turned Call of Duty into that as well now.
Or Battle Royale, I guess. Yeah, Battle Royale, I guess you would call it. There's not a lot of games.
Battle Royale, the next disco.
There we go. Well, actually, is it the arena shooter that's just... Because, like, like they're still putting out Halo games, but like it doesn't seem like anybody really plays them. Call of Duty doesn't, I don't think, even does their original arena shooter. Like CS:GO is still a thing. Like people still play CS:GO, but I mean, there's just not a lot of the arena shooter out there anymore. So maybe that's kind of a similar thing. But I don't know. I just thought that was like really fascinating. I was like trying to think. I was like, to some degree, like, you know, like bluegrass has waned in popularity. Like you've had things that kind of like go in and out of style, but like there's still bluegrass artists today. Like there's still people making bluegrass music.
And I grew up going to the Great Blue Heron Music Festival in upstate New York. It's a bluegrass festival, and I just got an email that it's happening once again with Donna the Buffalo once again playing. You know, bluegrass fans never quite completely go away, but I think disco fans kind of do.
Yeah. Gospel, still lots of gospel being made today.
Yep.
You know, there's just, it's just like really funny, like thinking about
jazz
that.
never
like,
goes away.
I cannot think of another genre that just appeared and then boom, was gone. And it's kind of cool to think about that. But so congratulations to Gloria Gaynor, who won the one and only Grammy Award ever given out for disco music. And
it's so funny because you said Gloria Gaynor again, and I'd already in my mind thought it was Donna Summer.
Yeah, it's definitely Gloria Gaynor.
No, I know, but like all the disco artists are just basically a monolith to me now.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, anyways, that was my interesting tidbit I heard on the radio this morning.
By the way, one aside from our ranking every band thing that cracked me up, it's disco adjacent. I on purpose kept referring to Blondie as she.
Okay.
Like, because I was kind of making fun of it, and people were like, Blondie's not a she, that's the name of the band. And I was like, yeah, I know.
You're getting band-splained too.
Band-splained, yeah. So anyway, I also got to feel the beautiful warmth of the sun this past week. I was in Tempe, Arizona for a music festival, 2 days, Friday and Saturday. The Innings Music Festival, it aligns with the opening of baseball spring training. And this year we decided to go because, you know, you go for a lot of bands, but the deciding factor this year was the fact that we were going to get to see the Killers. And so we went out there, we had a great time. It was in the mid to high 70s the whole time. It's one of the best festival setups because it's one of these it's 2 stages. The site plan is not too big and they can't let that many people in. So it's a smaller festival in an off time period. And the headliners this year were Fall Out Boy, The Killers, Incubus, The Black Keys, Slightly Stupid, All American Rejects, Neon Trees, Gary Clark Jr., Boyz II Men, Jack's Mannequin, and
okay. Not a bad list, all things considered, really.
No. So let's start with the negatives. Should we do some smash or trash, right? Let's start with the trash. I like 5, 6, 7. I like a lot of Fall Out Boy music. They were so cheesy. Their whole stage setup, they want to be Kiss without the makeup. They had pyro. They had loud banger firecrackers. They had weird stage setups that were like, you remember the stage setup for the Indiana Jones show at Disney World?
Yeah.
With the fake mountains and everything else.
Yeah.
So a lot of that with Pete Wentz standing atop a fake mountaintop in the middle of the stage. And at one point, Pete Wentz left stage and picked up a bass guitar that had a flamethrower at the end of it. And he was shooting flames all over the place. And it was just so over the top and cheesy that it almost detracted from the music. But I enjoyed Sugar We're Going Down. It was fun.
Is Fall Out Boy a one-hit wonder? What other songs do they have besides that one?
Centuries. They had I can't remember the name of the song from the Big Hero 6 soundtrack. It's a huge song. There's probably 10 that Dance Dance.
Oh, I remember that one.
There's a lot that you're not thinking of that if you heard them, you'd be going, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. They go 15, 20 deep with that audience. The audience was in heaven. Absolutely loved it. I'm maybe a little bit old and crusty for Fall Out Boy, even though they're getting older and crustier every year as well.
Well, as you can tell by my question, I'm not a Fall Out Boy guy. I was sitting there while you were talking, trying to think if I could. I remember "Sugar We're Going Down," but that was the only song, and I couldn't even think of what that song was called. Is that actually what it's called? So I'm not a Fall Out Boy guy. So for me, like none of that really surprises me. But I'm curious, like, do you even know, like, are they still intact? Like, is it still original
Yep.
members? Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't tell you if it was an original drummer, but
The two main guys, Pete Wentz
yeah,
and
you got Pete Wentz and
the other guy, the other
the
famous
singer.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
But
what? Probably not too many bands that you're like, oh, Pete Wentz and the other guy, when the other guy is the actual lead singer.
it is surprising too,
Why do?
just how much gravity Pete Wentz has, and he handles most of the stage talk. Although they shared a little bit of the stage talk, but Pete Wentz handled a lot of it, and he was awkward. Pete Wentz was very awkward.
And that was going to be my question. Why is it? Why do we know Pete Wentz? Why is he more famous than the singer
Patrick Stump.
Patrick Stump? Okay.
Yeah, because he writes the songs, he writes the lyrics.
Okay. Did he date? Did he date somebody famous too for a while? Maybe?
I think he was married to Ashley Simpson, Jessica Simpson's sister.
Yep. That's right. Okay.
But that was like 20 years ago, I think.
That's crazy. But anyways, yeah, Fall Out Boy musically not really my thing per se, but I was actually kind of curious how they would be live because I could see it kind of going a couple different ways. I didn't necessarily expect them to go full Kiss, but as soon as you said it, it was like, I'm like, okay, actually that makes sense.
Well, and we usually don't do this, and we especially don't do this very often with female artists. But I just have to say, Pete Wentz is a good-looking man. He is just pretty. He has perfect, long, straight, dark hair. He's got, like, just everything. I can see why he is the band leader in so many ways. He's probably only like 5'2" or something, but he just, he carries himself with a lot of ego and a lot of confidence.
Okay.
And he's a pretty man. He's a very pretty man. What can I say?
He's got the rock star vibe. He's got the rock star vibe.
Yeah. In spades. All right, so I've already gone on too long about Fall Out Boy. The highlight of Friday was easily Incubus. They're still just an absolutely incredible live band. They didn't overload the morning view stuff. They played a very festival set, but they just absolutely killed. I hadn't realized that their bass player retired, and they've got a female bass player now.
Okay.
And she was awesome. She was great.
Do you know who she is? Is she somebody noteworthy?
I have to look her up because she played with other people, and I should know, but this is all new information as of like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So,
well, definitely, like, if I was
Nicole Rowe.
Okay, not familiar with the name off the top of my head, but yeah, I think if I was going to Innings Fest this year, Incubus would have by far been the band I was most excited for. We've talked a little bit about that. Really huge fans of especially their early work, and then leading into Morning View, which was such a dynamic album. And it was one of those things, like, it's almost hard if you listen to Science and then Morning View like back to back. It's almost hard to believe that that's the same band. And I just think that it's really cool what they're all capable of doing. Really great songwriting. Not I would say Brandon Boyd is maybe not my favorite lyricist in the world. I think a lot of his lyrics are a little bit maybe cheesy to some degree, or maybe not cheesy, corny maybe. But regardless, he's a good singer.
And he leans in on the poignancy a lot. And so I could see that, but they really in a lot of ways, I think I'm a super fan for Incubus, but for a lot of people, seeing a festival set for a band like that is the perfect way to see them, because they opened with Megalomaniac, which I don't think they do very often, but it's like they weren't going to mess around and have anybody twiddling their thumbs, So opening with Megalomaniac, straight into Wish You Were Here, then Animali, Warning, The Warmth, Six Sad Little World. They covered Come Together by the Beatles, which was amazing.
Okay. Yep.
And then Are You In, Pardon Me, Stellar, and Drive finished the set. 14 songs.
What a set. That is a great set. How was the crowd reaction? Was the crowd into Incubus?
Big time.
Yeah.
Very, very big.
I feel like there's still a band that like there's like almost sneaky popular. Like they were never like the biggest band in the world, but like I think today if you told somebody you were going to see Incubus, they'd be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." Like, yeah, I like them.
Yeah.
They have
Well, and
like
the
this weird
reason,
like broad appeal.
yeah, the reason why you don't know Nicole Rowe is because she was a touring bass player for Miley Cyrus, who you can't stand.
Yep.
But you
Yep.
gotta understand. You know, you and I both understand the level of musicianship you have to
Yeah.
be to get that gig.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Slightly Stupid was, you know, white guys doing reggae.
Yeah. Is that like do they spell it Stoopid,
Of
right?
course they
If I
do,
remember.
Andrew.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah.
What? How
I
else would
only
you
va-
spell it?
I only remember them.
They were fun. It sounded okay,
Okay.
but yeah,
If
not that
I would
important to me.
to me they seem like a little bit of an outlier on this set compared to the other bands, but yeah.
And then I gotta give a couple shout outs. All American Rejects were they were never my favorite band, but I know a lot of their songs, and they got the assignment. They came out in full baseball uniforms and goofing off and having a great time, and but it's, you know, they made fun of themselves. They were having the best time. They played an unbelievable set with all kinds of hits. They sounded great. You know, anybody who didn't know them or didn't know their music ahead of time would have enjoyed their set, and that's exactly what you need to do in a festival setting.
They're a band that can they can definitely play a strong festival set. I saw them on Warp Tour, but this was still when they were still somewhat self-serious.
Mm-hmm.
They've certainly have never been a band that I've really liked too much, but I just remember like watching their set and thinking like, okay, I don't really like this band, but like everybody's really into it and you kind of get the vibe, like so you can kind of see how it works for a festival setting where you maybe have people who are fans of a lot of different kind of bands. Like it's an easily accessible sound, particularly for a festival
And
show.
he's a really good singer. He's a
For sure.
very good
No
singer,
doubt.
very accurate live, and maybe an even better frontman, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Anything else? Quickly, Neon Trees. I didn't really know who they are, but they do that song "Everybody Talks." Everybody
Okay.
knows that song. Everybody talks. And so when I was watching them and I heard that song, I was like, "Oh, it's those guys." It's a very festival experience. Most biggest pleasant surprise was Gary Clark Jr., who I didn't know much about, and I'm really not much for blues, but
Yeah.
that guy is like if a blues guy grew up loving Motown. There's so much soul. There's so much. He makes you feel something. It's not just formulaic by the book blues.
It's hard to be a casual blues fan, I think, because like a lot of blues is so similar. I mean, it's literally, there's the blues scale, like, right? Like just, on the music theory side of it, like you're somewhat boxed into what you can do as a blues artist. So if you like it, like you're all in and you like all these blues artists. But otherwise, if you're not like all in on it, it can be sometimes a little bit hard to sort of be a casual blues fan. But I've listened to plenty of Gary Clark Jr. in my life, and I've always found him kind of interesting because he is a true blues artist, but he has like you were saying, he brings in other elements of different genres a little bit in a way a lot of blues artists maybe don't. And I find
His
it kind of
falsetto is incredible.
yeah. Yeah. And so I find him interesting in that way. He is not one of my favorite artists of all time, but he's somebody that I've certainly listened to a fairly decent amount and I enjoy him. But yeah, I, I was, I didn't know he was going to be at Innings Festival, but I would have been kind of curious ahead of time, like how strong he would be live. Because again, sometimes with blues music, it can go either way. Like I've heard some really like reductive blues artists at like different, whether it be an opener or a couple different festivals, and it's always like if they're not really pouring their soul into it, it can just come across as really paint by numbers and kind of boring. So it's good to hear that he represented and stayed true to what he does in a live setting.
And in a live setting, his band is so good, and they were working with dynamics and really building and building and building to these gigantic crescendos with him just dominating the guitar, but then handing it off to his other guitarist to solo on top of that. Not solo where it's noodling like it's guitar masturbation. It was like these just giant leads. It was so great. And the swells of the different parts of his set were just really great. He forced everybody to feel something, which is just the best way that I can describe it. And then, we're going to talk about the Black Keys as kind of a transition, but I just have to say, I don't know how big of a fan of the Killers you are, but they were one of the most impressive live bands I've seen in a very long time. Whether you love them or like them a little, I just couldn't believe how great a set they put on. They tongue in cheek, they opened with a note for note cover of Center Field by John Fogerty, because, it's a baseball themed festival. And then they didn't mess around. They went straight into Mr. Brightside, played it second, just blew the roof off the entire festival. And you're like, well, okay, that normally I think they would have played that last, or to end the set before the encore.
Yeah.
But that's the level of confidence the Killers have in themselves.
I love that. I really love that. Like, I always think, to
I
me,
got chills just saying it, by the way, just because I admire the confidence.
Yeah. And it's like so many bands, like it's gotten to the point where it's like almost cheesy to play your biggest hit last. Like it's just, it's what the people want to hear, and you're going to make them, sit through everything else just waiting to get to that. Why not jump off with it? If you're confident enough in your set and what you can bring to the table, why not start off with that? Get everybody into it and going, and then you can like play some other stuff later, and it kind of gets people into the other stuff because they're already so amped up. I went through that a little bit when I saw Franz Ferdinand. They didn't open with, and I'm not even going to remember the name of the song, but whatever one of their big songs was. But they did it kind of they did it in the middle of their set, and it kind of got me more into it a little bit because it was like fun to have that earlier in the set, so you weren't like just standing around waiting for whatever the song was. But
yeah,
but I mean, Franz Ferdinand the Killers have more songs people probably know than Franz Ferdinand does, but Franz Ferdinand does have enough songs that they could scatter it kind of throughout the set. So it wasn't like that was the only song you've ever heard of theirs, but it was kind of cool that they played it earlier in the set.
Well, and then I won't go through the entire set list, but they ended their main set. They're one of the few bands that got to do an encore. So they ended their set with All These Things That I've Done, which is just one of their biggest, most celebratory songs. And then their encore was Human. And then they finished with When You Were Young, which is that's by far, I love Mr. Brightside, and I'll never take anything away from it. I'll never be too cool for it. But When You Were Young is easily my favorite Killers song. So for me to hear them end with that was just epic. I loved it.
Yeah, it was funny because you said you didn't know how much of a Killers fan I am. I was a huge fan of that first album when that came out. I thought it was refreshing. It was unique. They were bringing something different to this, to the sort of like at that time, it felt like rock was getting a little boring and, redundant. And they just kind of stood out in an interesting way that I really liked. But was their second album the one that had Human on it?
No, I don't remember. I just know that When You Were Young was on the second one.
I just remember when Human came out, though, that was like where they kind of lost me. I'm not a fan of that song. And again,
that was on their third record, Day and Age.
Okay. I'm not like a big lyrics guy. We've talked about this a lot, but the whole "Are you human or are you dancer" line just sticks out so bad. It just kind of really threw me off. And that was just kind of my jumping off point with them. But it was
to their credit, it somehow works. People love that song.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge hit at the time, no doubt about it.
I'm with you, though. I think it's super silly.
Yeah. And it's like every once in a while, an artist can put a lyric in that, in my opinion, is so bad that it becomes distracting. Like, to me, when I say I'm not a lyrics guy, like I'll notice like really great lyrics and I'll notice really bad lyrics. Like otherwise I'm content with like some people feel like if an artist doesn't have a lot to say, if they're just kind of in that middle zone, people don't like that. They want nothing but like standout great lyrics, and I'm not that way. But if a line that is so bad can like really jump out and distract me, and so I just remember like really noticing that. But it was kind of funny that you said though that he was a great singer live, because I remember back in the day seeing them live on like, now I didn't see him live, but seeing him on like late night shows, and he always seemed kind of hit or miss to me. Like sometimes he could almost be off, like almost like off key when playing live. And I'm wondering if that's just a factor of like time and experience, if he's just gotten a lot better, or if you just had him on like a really on day.
So it's funny. I almost feel like I've been telling the story for years, and I almost feel like I've told this one before, but apparently not. So Brandon Flowers was really inaccurate, almost a bad singer early on in the years live. And then I read an article a couple of years ago, or maybe God, it could be 10 years ago now. I don't even know. At some point, he quit smoking. And all of a sudden, he became a way better singer. And I'm telling you, this dude is absolute money singing. He sounds as good or better than the studio now. He was carrying, I don't think he was lip syncing at all, for the record. And I think he was smashing notes from the very beginning of the show all the way to the end. It was really impressive.
Wow, that's awesome. And yeah, you know, and it probably is also, again, I do think it's a factor though of experience and, you know, doing it live a lot more. I mean, he's got a lot more reps under his belt at this point than he did early in the career. Like I'm like these things that I'm talking about are like from my memory was like very early in their career when they were like just first breaking out, and you would hear him live and it did not sound the way it did on the album. So it's pretty cool that whether it's a combination or one or the other, him not smoking, like good for him. And that's pretty cool that.
All right, I'm reading here. I don't know exactly when this is, but fast forward to 4 years later, and Flowers was married with a child on the way. It was at this time that he remembered the example of his father and decided to kick his habits of smoking and drinking for good.
Okay, there we go. Good for him.
And he also committed to sticking to an LDS lifestyle more fully, which is Mormonism.
Latter-day Saints.
I had no idea.
I did not know that. No. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, quitting drinking and smoking will make you a better singer. No matter how good or bad you are, it'll make you better.
Yep.
Smoking is not a performance-enhancing drug for singers unless you're screaming, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, so just think what Eddie Vedder might do if he ever quit smoking.
I know, right? Oh, I forgot. I have to talk about Beck for a second. Beck is exactly as weird and as fun as he's always been, and
I totally missed that. I totally missed that Beck was there. I didn't even hear it when you were running through at the start of the show.
I might have forgotten.
I missed it. Okay. So that's
Are you a Beck guy?
Nah, not really. Like everybody, I listened to Mellow Gold and Odelay, you know, back in the day, like when I was in college.
I never disliked it.
I didn't dislike it, but I never like went all in. And then Sea Change I thought was a really good album. That was like
he played one from Sea Change.
Yeah, that was like
it was really good.
That was this thing where it was like, wow, like that was to me was almost more impressive, like when he just really stripped it down and like showed what he could do in that kind of a setting. But
if you're ever going to see a guy that you're like not a huge fan of, but you're marginally familiar with, Beck is the one to see, because you're going to have a good time.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So is he still involved? Well, since we're talking about everybody's religions here, is he still involved with Scientology?
I just presume he was supposed to be a big time one. Yeah.
Yeah. I just recently rewatched the Leah Remini series about Scientology, and I had forgotten so much about, like, again, I don't want to get into a whole thing about
Rolling Stone reveals, Beck reveals, I'm not a Scientologist, a new interview from 2019. So I don't.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Well, I will just say, good for him.
He denies he was ever a Scientologist, according to this headline in the Daily Beast.
Well, that's interesting, because I could have swore that was like a big talking point at one point.
I think so too. So maybe we were wrong all along, Andrew.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, so last but not least, the Black Keys. You and I wanted to talk about them anyway because they finally kind of broke their silence in a Rolling Stone interview about their tumultuous 2024, which they capped off by doing an Ohio concert for Crypto Bros or something, which they admitted that they just did for a payday. First of all, I saw them at Innings Festival. My sight lines weren't great for their set at the second stage. And to be honest, it was kind of underwhelming. They sounded like the band. They were okay. It's just I'm not a big Black Keys guy anyway.
No, my like so if we go way back to like the Rubber Factory, what was it, Magic Potion, I think. Some of those like earlier Thick Freakness, like some of those earlier albums that did lean more into the blues, like they were more straightforward of a blues rock band. I sort of liked that vibe. Like I remember really liking those albums early on in their career. And not to sound like the whole, well, they sold out, kind of thing. But like once they started working with Danger Mouse and making more pop songs,
Was that El Camino when they started doing
there
that?
was even, I think there was one even before that, maybe.
Attack and Release.
Attack and Release, I think, was like the first one where like it was really a different sound for them.
That's Danger Mouse produced.
Yeah. And so I just remember at that point, it was just kind of like, whatever, I'm there, whatever. Like, I don't hate it them. Like if they're on somewhere, it's not like, oh God, Black Keys suck. It's not that. It's just, I don't care about them. Like they make music that makes me feel nothing now. But I did actually kind of like the album they put out last year, Ohio Players. I actually found myself like, to me, felt a little bit like a return to form a little bit for them. It's kind of,
I enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed any Black Keys record in probably the last 10 years or so. I thought it was solid. Like even, you and I are music fans to the point where even if we listen to so many new things that I think you and I can judge quality even on things that we don't love.
Right.
And I'm not a huge Black Keys guy, but I thought it was a really quality record.
Yeah, definitely. It was their strongest album in a very, very, very long time.
And that might sound like faint praise, and I'm not trying to be a jerk. Like, that's my honest assessment.
It's actually like pretty good praise because like I can listen to a lot of things that are just disposable to me. Like I'll just listen to it and be like, this is fine. And then it's disposable. And quite frankly, that's what a lot of their recent output has been for me, where I give it my customary one listen and this is fine, whatever. I don't need to listen to this again. But that one, Ohio Players, I listened to a few times. So, I mean, it may sound like faint praise, but it's definitely still in the praise category for like, it was a good album.
So the interview that they did for Rolling Stone was really fascinating for junkies like you and me, because they talked about how they had their tour canceled and how it all went down, where basically they trust all the business stuff to their agents and their booking agents and all these different people in the machine around them. And yeah, it was a failure and tickets didn't go well and they trusted everybody on the pricing and everything else. And then, they were told that if they canceled, they could rebook in smaller venues, but then apparently those venues never existed, or that deal never existed. They were very careful. They were they were very honest. They weren't being wimps about it, but they also openly acknowledged they were trying not to get sued for what they were saying in their interview, which I have no problem with. I think that's just smart business.
They were doing the equivalent of Marshawn Lynch when he did the
I'm here just because I have to be.
Like I'm here so I don't get fined or whatever, or Rasheed Wallace, both teams played hard.
But the interesting thing to me, I think, was just hearing about how a very successful band that was essentially printing money early in their career, and the different phases of career now that they're in, where they'd kind of stopped paying attention to the business and just trusted other people too much. And now they're going to redouble their efforts into paying attention to that side of the ledger.
It's probably worth mentioning who their representative was, who their management was. It was Isaac. Is it Isaac Azaroff? I think that's what his name is. He's one of the most like prominent band managers out there. Like this is not a like shady backroom guy. Like this is somebody with a pretty strong reputation.
Irving Azoff.
Irving Azoff, yeah. And so, like, I think that's what was interesting, especially when he kept saying, "I'm trying not to get sued." It's probably in part because he realized, like, they probably have a pretty strong legal department behind them, I would assume. And so it was a little bit surprising from that standpoint. I will say it's funny when you read this interview and just like the stark difference in personalities between the two members of this band, Patrick Carney and Dan Auerbach. Like, Dan is very much like, he's just the artist, man. Like, he's like, he didn't care about any of this. He has nothing to say about any of it, really, like positive or negative. Like, he's just like, I don't know. Like, it was like almost like the like quintessential, like, I just write the songs, man. Like, whatever. And Patrick, who's always been a little bit more of the mouthpiece of the band and a guy not afraid to speak his mind, for better or often for worse. He's gotten himself into a lot of trouble with his mouth over the years. So it was kind of funny to hear those stark differences. But like, I don't know if they came across as sympathetic per se, but as somebody who like really cares about music being successful as a business, like, it matters a lot to me that music can some ways, like, I was going to say continue be successful as a business, but obviously we've talked a lot, like, I don't know if continue is the right word because there's a lot of struggle to be had out there. So I'm just deeply invested in wanting bands to be successful. So from that standpoint, it was a little bit heartbreaking though to like put yourself in their shoes and to imagine like you put out this album that's getting pretty solidly reviewed. People are excited about it. You're playing, these arena shows that you're told are going to sell out, and you're excited. You feel like you've got this momentum, and then it all just gets like pulled out completely from underneath you, and you become somewhat of a laughing stock. I don't think you and I laughed about it when we talked about this originally, but like it was like it was a tough look for them to like have to be like, look, we booked these arenas, we can't sell them out, and we had to cancel our tour. And there was definitely a lot of people pointing their fingers and going ha ha at them for that.
So, and I'll admit, I wasn't going ha ha, but I was kind of like a little bit indignant about, well, serves you right for trying to charge those prices.
Oh yes, we did talk about it that way, no doubt about it, but we weren't laughing at them.
No, I agree with that. And I really thought this interview did a lot. I really felt good about them, and it humanized them. It put me on their side. It's smart that they did it, at least for my money. And a band that I'm not a very giant fan of, like, I'll kind of be rooting for the next thing. I'll definitely check out their next record. It sounds like they're really leaning into the music and having a great time writing again for the first time
really
in a long time.
I actually did not know that they were getting along on that level again, because they famously like got to a point where they were not even talking to each other. It was really just a band of two individuals. And that's where you like wonder how good the music can ever really be when you don't enjoy making music with the people that you're in the room with. But yeah, they said that was my biggest surprise from the article, was just hearing how much they're getting along right now, and that they're enjoying writing music together. And I think that's always cool when you hear like these bands that like kind of get to the point where they realize like, hey, you know what? Like, we actually make really great music together, and maybe we just should focus on that and not worry so much about our differences. And it's a lesson the Gallagher brothers could learn a thing or two from. No, they mentioned they've got another album coming out already. Black Keys have another album coming out this year, so I'm definitely interested to check it out. Like you said, I'll listen to it for sure.
Yeah. All right, where do you want to go next, Andrew?
So, has any music podcast ever had a segment called Recommendation Corner?
I don't think so. I think it's brand new.
I think we should patent this and call it Recommendation Corner.
If you ever hear anybody doing Recommendation Corner from this point on, just know that they stole it from us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're staking claim on it. But no, I think we had a couple albums we wanted to talk about. I'll just talk about this record by this band called Abdomen. I don't know where they're from actually, but they're a newer band. I think this was their second album. It's called Yes, I Don't Know. And
if you search for Abdomen Band, by the way, you get a lot of postpartum stuff to go around your waist.
That's great. But yeah, they were like introduced to me like as a shoegaze band, and so I was expecting a shoegaze album out of them.
Abdomen
And
are a Dutch power trio. They make
okay,
clangy psychedelic rock music.
and there you go. You just hit on it. It's not shoegaze, it's psychedelic. And I definitely in the 2010s, and maybe it was even the 2000s, like late 2000s, early 2010s, like went through this phase where I was listening to like a lot of like Wooden Ships and I'm trying to remember the name of that other, but like I kind of got into like the modern psychedelic rock band thing. So for me, there was something in this that I immediately connected with. But yeah, this album, I think, I know it's not your thing exactly, but as somebody like me who loves when bands don't just do the verse, chorus, verse thing, like I love songs that are almost entirely constructed as like journeys. Like you start somewhere, you go somewhere for a while, you might hang out in that place for a while, and then you move to the next place and you kind of hang out there. Like some people find that boring, and that's fine. If that's not your thing, and if you don't care for psychedelic rock much, maybe this won't be your thing. But if you do it like that, I would definitely recommend checking these guys out, because this is a very well executed album at what it does. And I don't want to steal Craig's thunder on the comp, but Craig immediately was like compared him to Sonic Youth, and I think that's a pretty like fair thing, because they do have like these elements of like I felt like I was hearing almost like pre-Nirvana Seattle sound a little bit. Well, that's not that far off from Sonic Youth's sound. Like even though Sonic Youth is not from Seattle, that's a very adjacent sound. So I think it's a pretty decent comparison. It's a lot of experimentation, a lot of like free flowing thoughts. And for me, it's a really great album. It was the first album that I had like when on January 1st this year, when I had my list of albums I'm looking forward to in the future. This was the first one. So I've been looking forward to this for a while. And for me, it definitely did not disappoint. So definitely check it out if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've started writing notes, keeping track in a spreadsheet. My notes were Sonic Youth influence is apparent, no hooks, no choruses, lots of layered builds, not for me, solid quality.
Yeah, that's pretty much perfect. Like you can attest to this. When I sent it to you, I told you right up front, I knew why you weren't going to like it. And I knew
Yes.
you weren't going to like it because there's absolutely no hooks in this. It's probably one of the bigger places you and I differ musically, is that I can enjoy this kind of thing a lot more than you can. So I knew you weren't going to love it, but I wanted you to at least check it out, because I did think it was worth hearing that like a modern band executing this style of psychedelic rock is just really cool. Like I can just envision like if I saw them in a club show somewhere and I didn't really know who they were, like this music would put me in a trance like immediately. Like that's just like every time I listen to this album, I just almost feel like a live quality to it. Like I feel like I'm standing inside some small club watching this band play.
And you know what? Now that you mention that, I probably would like it live in ways that I don't really like it on the record.
Yeah. So
And then I also wanted a recommendation corner. I also wanted to talk about Bambi by Anxious. It's a record by the band Anxious. This is one that I'd kind of forgotten about, and you reminded me of. And we liked their last one, or I liked their last record.
I like the last record a lot.
Okay, it was called Little Green House.
Yeah.
And so I listened to this one. I don't have much to say in terms of like criticism or acclaim yet, except that I've listened to it a bunch and I really like it. But nothing has stuck out as like, hey, you got to listen to these 2 or 3 songs. I don't feel like there are any singles on this. I'm enjoying the vibe of the whole thing from beginning to end. I think it finishes really well. And like sonically, it doesn't sound exactly like Stay Inside, but it reminded me of kind of that realm.
Yeah,
from
for
last
sure.
year.
Like this is an album that's getting a lot of buzz right now. Like a lot of people are really loving it. And it's interesting because I remember when Little Green House came out, listening to it and being like, oh, this is really good. And then kind of forgetting about it for a while. And then I like later went back and like maybe when I was doing like a year end list or something, I went back and I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this album. And I listened to it and like almost like as time had passed, I liked it a lot more. And I'm wondering if Bambi will have a little bit of that effect on me as well. Like when I listen to it right now, it doesn't like grab me in a way that like makes me excited to have like a lot to say about it. But like I can acknowledge though, but like it's really good and I really like it and I want to listen to it. But like there's just something weird about it that it doesn't like I don't know, like it's almost hard to even describe. Like I'm struggling right now to like explain what I mean by this, that it doesn't inspire like a lot of thoughtful insight from me right now about this record.
It's a little nerve-wracking for me that I think I like a record this much, but I can't tell you one song that sticks out to me.
Yeah.
And so for me, that means that it might not have longevity as this year moves along, even though right now I'm telling you, like, this is notable. This is worth listening to. It hits all the right buttons, all the right notes. But yeah, I don't hear any singles. And
no. And then, like,
which is a weird thing to say about this like kind of music in 2025, the year of our Lord.
Yeah. Well, but also any like subtle criticism people might be detecting in me is also just a factor of that this is more of a you band than a me band anyways. Like
it's a little emo tinged.
Yes. And so it's not squarely in my wheelhouse, but it's very good. Definitely worth listening to.
All right, let's finish by once again talking about LS Dunes. And I'll actually start because I know you're going to go a little bit longer this time. So this is a record that I really, really liked the first time. And my obsession with it has only grown to the point where, like, I have no idea how the year's going to finish out. It's only the end of February, but this is easily, far and away, my very favorite thing that I've listened to that's brand new so far this year. It's not even close. I've got 1, 2, 3, 5 things that I've already liked on Spotify from this record already, and I think there could be more. Just, I hate to narrow it down to just the singer, but man, the vocal work on this is just absolutely phenomenal. The melodies, the vocal melodies that were written and are being hit by Anthony Green on this record, they're just heart-wrenching, and I love them.
Yeah, I like. So what's that? Last week that we talked about it a little bit. I think
so.
Mentioned it in passing, and I think at the time I just said it hadn't really like connected with me at the time. And I was listening to it this week, and it was like I must have been in the right mood or whatever, where I gave it a little bit of a closer listen. And yeah, I mean, this album is unbelievable, and it's always so hard. Like I run into this problem with anything Anthony Green does, where it's like it's almost hard to talk about the music because like you're just immediately drawn to his voice and you just want to talk about Anthony Green singing. But like it's not like he's doing anything different. Like if you like Anthony Green, you're gonna like this. Like this is prototypical Anthony Green vocal work.
But it's also Anthony Green at his best.
But it is Anthony Green at his best. But also like the band just crushes it on this album. Like I don't think the first time I listened I was really paying close enough attention. I was maybe almost paying too much attention to Anthony's vocals and not enough attention to what the band was doing. The guitar work on this album is phenomenal. These guys are killing it. It was really, really good.
And you know what's interesting about that, by the way? So the Travis Stever is one of the guitarists from Coheed, and he often gets overshadowed in his own band by Claudio, who is not only a phenomenal singer, but a ridiculous guitar player with chops for days.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool that he's gotten a chance to shine on this record. I'm not as familiar with Frank Iero from My Chemical Romance.
Oh, okay. I knew that name sounded familiar.
I'm familiar with My Chemical Romance, but I don't remember just obsessing about the guitars.
Agreed.
And that's not a shot. And then Tim Payne is, I think, the bass player, and then Tucker Rule from Thursday is the drummer.
That's right. But yeah, the song that like really got me was Things I Thought Would Last Forever. Like that song just like that was the one that like really made me
that's
be
one of
like,
the ones I liked.
yeah, imagine that. So yeah, no, it's I think I had said to you, I think the word I used was I undersold it last week. So I don't want to oversell it this week. Like I
I
don't
do.
know. You like, yeah, for you, like I think it's a little bit higher maybe than it is even for me. I don't know that I would necessarily think this will end up being a top 10 contender for me, but definitely worth listening. I've been listening to it a ton this week and going to keep listening to it. It's a really, really great album.
It is, and it finishes wonderful. It finishes great. The last song is Forgiveness.
Yeah.
And you and I are obsessed with album closers, and this is a good
If
one.
you nail that album closer, you're going to get me to keep listening over and over again, for sure.
All right, is there anything else we need to talk about for the good of the order?
I don't think so. I think this is a pretty nice, tight, compact episode.
Look at us.
We're starting to get these potpourri episodes down pat. Like it's just been a weird, like, between different scheduling and stuff. We haven't had a chance to like really, like, I don't want to say we blew our wad too early, but like, we put so much into that 3-hour episode that like after that, it feels like we've been scrambling a bit. We haven't had time to really organize, but we do have a lot of albums that we want to go back and review. The 2015 albums that we want to review. I'm throwing 2015 in there, Craig, because I'm going to make you do an album or do an episode on the Foxing album Dealer, which came out in 2015. So we got a 10-year anniversary.
Twist my arm, dude. And twist my arm.
I have not really had a chance to really go deep on this podcast about that album, an album that I have just absolutely fallen in love with over the last year in a way I never did before. So that's just a fair warning to people. We'll have that one coming at some point in the future.
There was a moment where I would have said that was my favorite Foxing record. And I don't think I would say that right now. But that's not a shot at that record, but that's how much I love it.
Yeah.
And everybody who tunes in on YouTube, they can just watch me hug myself while we talk about Dealer the whole time. Cause it's the ultimate emo hug yourself while you listen to it record.
Oh, it is, but man, God, it's so good. So good.
I think it's funny. A friend of mine that also is familiar with Foxing and listened to that record, I remember telling him like how much I liked it, and he was like, yeah, it's not really that much of a good time though, is it?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
That's my favorite stuff is not that much of a good time, which is really weird to say.
Crushingly sad album. There's no doubt about it.
But like, so beautiful.
But that's what great art is. Like it makes you feel like that's part of why I love it so much is because it makes you feel so many different things.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we appreciate you guys tuning in on YouTube or Spotify or the podcast player app of your choice. Thanks for interacting with our short clips too. Those are doing really well on YouTube and on Instagram, even when people hate us for our quote unquote hot takes.
That's right.
But we're having fun doing this, and I hope that comes across more than anything else. And shoot us some feedback. Let us know what you want us to talk about. We might or might not take your suggestions,
or tell us your favorite disco song.
Yeah.
Or tell us if you know a genre, if you can think of a genre or an art form or something comparable to disco that like popped up out of nowhere, became hugely popular, and then just was eradicated from the face of the earth.
I mean, what about Skrillex? Does that count?
I think Skrillex is still doing his thing.
I mean, so's Donna Summer probably. I have no idea.
But like, I mean, what's the mouse guy?
Danger Mouse?
No, not Danger Mouse, but the guy Dead Mouse.
Dead Mouse
he's still doing his thing too. Like EDM is still going pretty strong.
You're right.
Yeah.
All right. So we still don't have an answer. If you have one, let us know. And anything else, let us know. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the Album of Record podcast.